What happens if someone finds your Bitcoin seed phrase? With a standard hardware wallet, they have everything they need. One key, one credential, that is all it takes. But what if no single key was enough to move your Bitcoin? What if you needed two keys from two different locations to authorize any transaction? That is the basic idea behind multisig. It sounds complicated. It is not. But whether you actually need it is a much more interesting question. I'm Sats, and today we're making Bitcoin multisig actually make sense. Let's keep it simple. When you hold Bitcoin in a standard hardware wallet, one seed phrase controls everything. That is called single key custody, or single sig. The security model is straightforward. Whoever has the seed phrase can access the Bitcoin. Whoever does not cannot. That single key model has one fundamental vulnerability: a single point of failure. If someone finds your seed phrase, they have your Bitcoin. If you lose your seed phrase and your device fails at the same time, your Bitcoin may be permanently inaccessible. The security depends entirely on one credential. Multisig changes this. Instead of one key controlling everything, multisig requires multiple keys to authorize a transaction. The most common setup is 2 of 3. 3 keys are created. Any 2 of them together can authorize a transaction. No single one of them can. Here is why that changes the security model in both directions. On the loss side, if you lose one of your 3 keys, you still have the other 2. Those 2 are enough to move your Bitcoin to a new wallet. You are not stuck. Single key custody has no equivalent safety net. Lose the one key, and the Bitcoin is gone. On the theft side, if an attacker finds one of your 3 keys, they have nothing useful. They need 2 keys to move the Bitcoin. As long as those keys are stored in genuinely separate locations, finding one does not put your Bitcoin at risk. Single key custody offers no equivalent protection. Find the one key, and the Bitcoin is gone. That is the core of multisig. It removes the single key failure point for both loss and theft. Here is the honest counterpoint, and this is what most multisig content glosses over. Multisig does not make security simpler. It makes it more resilient to specific failures while introducing new complexity and new things that can go wrong. Setting up multisig correctly requires creating and properly backing up multiple seed phrases, storing them in genuinely separate secure locations, keeping track of a wallet configuration file without which the multisig setup cannot be reconstructed even if you have all the keys, and understanding how to use the signing process correctly every time you want to move Bitcoin. Each of those steps is a potential failure point. Bitcoin can become inaccessible if the wallet configuration file is not backed up correctly, even when you still have all the individual keys. A multi-sig setup can also fail operationally if you never test the signing process before storing the keys remotely. This is not an argument against multi-sig. It is an argument for understanding what you are taking on before you set it up. The more useful framing is this: multi-sig shifts the threat model rather than eliminating it. Single key custody is vulnerable to a single seed phrase being found or lost. Multisig is more resistant to those specific threats but creates operational complexity that has its own failure modes. Security is not about adding the maximum number of layers. It is about building a system you can actually operate correctly. If this is the kind of honest Bitcoin conversation you are looking for, the subscribe button is right there. Now, the question most people actually want answered: do you need it? Honest answer: most beginners do not need multisig right now. A well-implemented single-key setup with a hardware wallet, a properly backed-up seed phrase stored securely and separately from the device, and a clear plan for how someone you trust can access it if something happens to you covers the vast majority of the risks that beginners actually face. Multisig becomes worth considering when your holdings reach a level where the additional operational complexity is justified by the additional protection it provides. There is no universal Bitcoin amount where multisig suddenly becomes necessary. The right question is whether the additional protection is worth the additional complexity for your particular situation and your particular threat model. It is also worth considering if you have a specific threat model that multisig addresses directly. If you are worried about a scenario where someone might coerce you into revealing your seed phrase, the fact that no single key can authorize a transaction is a meaningful protection. If you are managing Bitcoin on behalf of a family or organization where no single individual should have unilateral control, multisig is the natural structure. For most beginners holding Bitcoin for the first time, the priority is getting the single key setup right. Hardware wallet, properly backed up seed phrase, separate storage, clear inheritance plan. That is the foundation. Multisig is a worthwhile next step after that foundation is solid. not a replacement for it. One more thing worth understanding. There is a simpler intermediate option between a standard hardware wallet and full multisig. The passphrase feature, sometimes informally called the 25th word, adds an additional layer of security to a single seed phrase. It means that even if someone finds your seed phrase, they cannot access your Bitcoin without also knowing the passphrase. It does not eliminate the single point of failure in the same way multisig does, but it significantly raises the bar for theft with considerably less operational complexity than multisig. Both Ledger and Trezor support the passphrase feature. If you are thinking about additional security for your Bitcoin but are not ready for the full complexity of multisig, the passphrase is worth understanding as an intermediate step. We will cover the full passphrase versus multisig comparison in a future video. For now, the important thing to take away is that both options exist. They solve different problems, and neither is automatically the right choice for every holder at every stage. Let's bring it together. Multisig requires multiple keys to authorize a Bitcoin transaction. The most common setup is 2 of 3, where any 2 of 3 keys can move the Bitcoin, but no single one can. This eliminates the single point of failure on both sides. You cannot lose access from one lost key. An attacker cannot steal from one compromised key. But multisig introduces operational complexity and new failure modes. Backing up multiple seed phrases, maintaining a wallet configuration file, and using the signing process correctly are all additional responsibilities. Security is not about adding maximum layers, it is about building a system you can actually operate correctly. Most beginners do not need multisig right now. Get the single key setup right first. Hardware wallet, properly backed up seed phrase, separate storage, clear inheritance plan. Multisig is the right next step once that foundation is solid, and your holdings justify the additional complexity. The passphrase feature is a simpler, intermediate option worth understanding. More on that in a future video. If you want to make sure your current single key setup is as secure as it can be before thinking about multisig, the video on how to back up your Bitcoin wallet properly covers every step. That is the foundation everything else builds on. Watch that next. Stack smart, stay curious. See you in the next stack.